Coming up on Network Africa, Tigrayan forces seize a town in the Amhara region as the war in Ethiopia continues. 6 deaths now recorded after Sierra Leone flash floods. Plus, Kenya's Raila Odinga maintains he won August 9's election but will respect the court's ruling even as Kenyans continue to vote in postponed local elections. Hello and a warm welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. Well, let's begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Rival factions battled across Libya's capital on Saturday in the worst fighting there for 2 years, as an eyewitness said forces aligned with a parliament-backed administration moved on the city to try to take power. The Tripoli government's health ministry said 32 people died and 159 were injured. Sustained fighting in the city over the control of government will likely plunge Libya back into full-blown war after 2 years of comparative peace that brought an abortive political process aimed at holding national elections. However, the capital was quiet early on Saturday. Roads in the city were busy with motorists, shops were open, and people were clearing away smashed glass and other debris from Saturday's violence, with burnt-out vehicles lining some streets in central Tripoli. French President Emmanuel Macron signed a cooperation treaty with Algeria on Saturday as a conclusion to a 3-day visit to the North African country. The trauma of French colonial rule in Algeria and the bitter independence war that ended it in 1962 has haunted relations between the two countries for decades and played into a diplomatic dispute that erupted last year. In a speech after the signing, Macron said France-Algerian bilateral relations is profoundly close. Ties with Algeria have become more important for France because the war in Ukraine has increased demand in Europe for North African gas and because of surging migration across the Mediterranean. On Sunday, amidst post-election tension, Angola held a funeral for long-serving ex-leader José Eduardo dos Santos, who died in Spain in July, but whose burial was delayed by a family request for an autopsy. Mr. dos Santos died in a clinic in Barcelona in July. His funeral was taking place days after general elections. Dos Santos and his family dominated Angolan politics for the 38 years that he ruled until 2017. And finally, migrants aboard the Open Arms Uno rescue boat finally reached land on Saturday at the Italian port of Messina after spending at least 10 days at sea. The Spanish charity Open Arms on August 17th rescued 101 migrants, mostly Egyptian men, in a rickety wooden boat off the Tunisian coast that had been adrift for at least a day. One man in dire need of urgent medical attention had been allowed to disembark in Italy with his companion, but the rest were told to remain on board the rescue vessel while it sought permission to disembark.
Good luck. Good luck.
Well, fighting has continued in the northern Ethiopian region of Amhara, that's bordering Tigray, and it's coming after 5 months of humanitarian truce that was shattered last week. Well, Tigrayan forces took the Amhara town of Kobo on Saturday after pushing southwards near the border. The army had earlier said it was withdrawing from the town to avoid the risk of a high number of casualties. However, residents of nearby towns and villages say fighting has continued in the mountain ranges close by and the situation remains volatile. Meanwhile, authorities in Waldir and Dessie, the two major Amhara cities near the area, have imposed partial nighttime curfews. Kia Segaye is a lawyer and political analyst in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He joins us now on the program for more discussions. Thank you so much for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Well, with this renewed fighting that, broke out last week, especially coming after a 5-month lull, this has dashed hopes of peace in Ethiopia, isn't it? Well, talk to us about, what really is the situation on ground and how our residents reacted.
Yeah, as you said, it's very difficult situation. As you know, the TPLF has expanded the war from the Tigray region to Amhara region, especially neighboring Amhara region, northern Amhara region, and the Afar region. Uh, Millions were already displaced due to continued violence. And as you rightly mentioned, the federal government declared indefinite humanitarian truce in March 2022. And unfortunately, the TPLF or the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front was using this opportunity to prepare for another round of war. So the Ethiopian Federal Army and the regional forces are just in defensive position, and they're trying to prevent human casualties because the TPLF is well known in using human waves, especially children and women. So in order to avoid human casualties, the federal defense forces and regional forces have moved to southern part of northern Amhara, which is next to Kobo. So it's very difficult. Ultimately, it is the innocent citizens and the innocent people are going to be affected, just like the previous time, especially the children and women will be directly affected by this expanded war by the TPL.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate because, this renewed violence comes amid a worsening humanitarian situation. Recently, we've heard from the WHO chief, the World Health Organization's Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who happens to be an Ethiopian and is ethnic Tigrayan. Now, he was criticizing world leaders for their silence about the conflict, suggesting that racism is behind this, unlike the attention that has been given to the crisis in Ukraine. Do you agree with this?
No, I don't agree with that. Unfortunately, this is not a fair assessment of the situation on the ground. In fact, Dr. Tedros is a well-known member and the leader of one of the leaders of the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. He has been the Ethiopian Minister of Health and Minister of Foreign Affairs before his current appointment. We have seen a number of press briefings, and he's not actually trying to address the problems faced by the Tigrayan people or the Ethiopian people. He's just promoting, or he's just using his position to promote his political party, which is the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. So it's a very unfortunate that a person with this position has been simply propagating or is acting like a TPLF propagandist. If he really cares about the people, the Tigrayan people, the Ethiopian people living in Tigray region, he should really promote peace and request his party, his political party, the TPLF, to sit and negotiate. The federal government has been proposing and providing peace options through the African Union, through the African Union's envoy, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, without any precondition. The TPLF pushed all these offers. So if Dr. Tedros is really caring for his people, he should really ask or promote the TPLF to sit and negotiate and settle all these conflicts in a very peaceful and amicable manner. So, the opposite is true. He's just trying to use racism card to just promote his political party's agenda, which is just grabbing the central power through violence, which is unacceptable by the Ethiopian people and government, which is a legitimately elected government last year. So totally, it's just a false propaganda.
Well, those are your thoughts. I also want to ask about, you mentioned the African Union. Is there more that can be done, especially now this fighting has started again? Is there more that can be done from that regional body, which is headquartered in Ethiopia?
Yes. Yeah, the African Union has, openly requested both parties to sit and negotiate. And the African Union appointed former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, as I've said, as a special envoy to resolve, to assist or facilitate in this, amicable dispute settlement. Unfortunately, the TPLF is not ready to negotiate with the federal government because I don't think they get what they demand or what they want through a peaceful means. What we have to bear in mind is this political group has ruled Ethiopia for 27 years, and until the Ethiopian people said enough in 2018, the fundamental reason for all this conflict is the intention and the demands of the TPLF to control the central power again. The central power it's used to control. And the time has changed. And the TPLF leaders are not ready to accept the new changes, the new situation in the whole of Ethiopia. So it's very unfortunate. The government, the Ethiopian federal government, is still saying the peace option is ready without any precondition. So as we know, this is an African problem, and it should be solved through an African means. So African solution to African problems.
All right, then.
Rather than this, the spokesperson of the TPLF recently published an article saying that the African Union will not deliver peace for Tigray, which is ridiculous for me.
Okay, then. Kia Segaye, a lawyer and political analyst, thank you very much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you so much.
To West Africa here, where at least 6 people have been killed after torrential rains caused flash floods and landslides in parts of Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown. According to local media reports, the victims include a family of 3 who were killed after a mudslide destroyed 2 homes in an informal settlement in Lukin Town, situated on a steep slope just above the Kisi neighborhood. Mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Akisoya, visited areas affected by the heavy rains and urged those affected to move to safe grounds, while she thanked the different agencies that had come up to the aid of the affected residents. 340,000. That's the number of people that have now been impacted by catastrophic flooding in 11 of Chad's 23 provinces. Well, according to United Nations spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, as of the 16th of August, the flooding had killed 22 people and caused extensive damages to homes, infrastructure, agricultural lands and livestock. However, the UN says it is with its humanitarian partners that they are supporting government-led responses to provide assistance in the east and in N'Djamena.
The other side of the coin is in Chad, where 340,000 people have now been impacted by catastrophic flooding in 11 of the country's 23 provinces. As of August 16th, the flooding had killed 22 people and caused extensive damage to homes, infrastructure, agricultural lands, and livestock. It also sent the rates of malaria skyrocketing and has heightened fears of cholera outbreaks. We, along with our humanitarian partners, are supporting the government-led response to provide life-saving assistance, including food, health services, shelter, and other essential supplies. So far, we've reached around 30,000 people in the east and in N'Djamena. We're wrapping up our efforts to reach more people. And our team yesterday called for financial support from donors. The humanitarian needs prior to the floods were only funded at 34% as of mid-August, with $171 million received out of $510 million needed.
Still ahead on the program. Welcome back to the program. We continue in Kenya, where citizens have been voting in some areas where polls had been postponed because of mix-ups in ballot papers. The polling stations opened and no incidents have been reported so far. People in Mombasa County in the Coast Region and Kakamega in the West are voting for governors in hotly contested elections. The voters will also be electing members of parliament for 4 constituencies, the Kachaliba and Pokot South, Rongai in Nakuru County, and Kitui Rural Kitui County. Two county assembly representative seats are also expected to be filled, while the elections were previously rescheduled for the 23rd of August, but was postponed again after what the electoral body chairperson said was intimidation and harassment of poll officials. Well, in the meantime, former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga says he is confident that the Supreme Court will grant his request to overturn the result of the August 9th election, which saw his rival, William Ruto, announced as president-elect, and he's citing solid evidence in the case. Mr. Odinga took 48.8% of the vote compared to Mr. Ruto's 50.5%, but Mr. Odinga does not accept these results. Well, in an interview with the BBC, he also said he would respect the outcome of the court's decision and that the judgment could have major implications on electoral processes across Africa. He also adds that the future of democracy on the continent is at stake, citing retrogression in some African countries.
As you know, we have submitted our application to the court, and we have several prayers. The first prayer is for a retelling of the results using the genuine result that came from the polling stations. And when that is done, because we have ourselves the real outcomes, we should be then announced as the winners. If the courts decide otherwise, we will basically respect the ruling of the courts. I don't really want to appear as if I'm trying to blackmail the Supreme Court. I want the Supreme Court to hear this case impartially and make a ruling that is impartial, that basically respects democracy. No, we will just try to ensure that we don't have a repeat of what has happened. That is really our intention. We don't want the voice of the people to be muzzled through this manipulation like happened this time around.
Japan is pledging $30 billion in aid for development in Africa, saying it wants to work more closely with the continent with the rules-based international order under threat after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Addressing a Japan-Africa summit in Tunisia, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said Tokyo would work to ensure grain shipments to Africa amid a global shortage. Mr. Kishida says the $30 billion would be delivered over 3 years, promising smaller sums for food security in coordination with the African Development Bank. The summit has given Tunisian President Kais Saied his biggest international platform since his 2019 election, and it comes after he seized broad powers formerly enshrined through a constitutional referendum, a move his critics have called a coup. Well, the French Energy Ministry has confirmed reports that talks are underway between gas giant ENGIE and Algeria's Sonatrach to potentially increase gas imports to France. Reports on Sunday suggested a 50% boost being discussed. The development comes soon after President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Algeria. Well, gas makes up a fifth of France's energy needs, with Algeria covering just over 8% of that. Algeria is Europe's biggest gas supplier after Russia and Norway. All the authorities in Ghana are investigating after a man was mauled to death by a lion after he climbed into a zoo enclosure in the capital, Accra. Officials say the man, described as middle-aged, died from his injuries after Sunday's attack. Well, wildlife authorities suspect he may have planned to steal 2 rare white lion cubs, which have become a big draw since their birth last November. The victim's body was retrieved from the zoo, and taken to a local morgue. Police have now opened a probe to establish the motive of the intruder and the circumstances surrounding the attack. A study by Egypt's Erupt Foundation for Development and Equality, EFDE, recorded 813 crimes of violence against women and girls. Well, one notable experience is that of a 21-year-old student, Nayera Ashraf, who was stabbed 19 times by her stalker. Well, her death gained coverage across the Middle East and drew attention to other violent crimes against women in Egypt.
A series of violent crimes against women in Egypt has drawn attention to gaps in legal and social protections that leave female citizens vulnerable to attacks and harassment. The highest profile case was the murder in late June of 21-year-old student Nayera Ashraf, who was stabbed 19 times outside the gates of a university in Masura, north of Cairo. It emerged that the man convicted for killing, Mohammed Adel, had been harassing her for almost a year after she rejected his marriage proposal. Khalil Abdel Rahman, a lawyer for Ashraf's family, says Adel stalked her, intimidated her publicly, created fake social media accounts using photographs of her face edited onto pornographic images, and texted her death threats.
If these police reports had undergone proper legal procedures and action was taken against the accused person, Nayera would not have been killed.
In a statement issued ahead of Adel's trial, the prosecution said it confirmed its firm response towards all forms of crimes of violence and aggression, especially those against women and youth. Amid the public outcry, a court in Masura found Ashraf's killer, Adel, guilty of premeditated murder within days of the crime. Social pressure against women reporting crimes also remains an obstacle. Such pressure was clear in the case of Mary Magdi, a 35-year-old woman who reported her husband to the police for 4 incidents of violent assaults.
I felt like my right was gone this time. Every time I was beaten, I filed a police report, then dropped it after a day or two, because we have 3 daughters and our marriage is according to Christian faith, no divorce. Family, friends, and relatives would tell me, what about your home and your children? And they asked me to give him another chance.
While he was summoned for questioning, no legal action was taken at first over our allegations. But within a week, her husband was arrested and sentenced to a year in prison. However, Magdid said she still remained fearful for her life and the lives of her daughters once he is released.
In Libya, a ship of books that sails from one country to another, called Logos Hope, has docked in Benghazi. Well, for book lovers, thousands have been attracted to the floating library docks.
Logos Hope, a floating international library, has docked at Benghazi port, attracting around 20,000 visitors, according to its supervisors. The floating book fair presented for nearly a week a large collection of books, including more than 5,000 titles.
Over 20,000 visitors already here in Benghazi, and we can see that the people of Benghazi are very, very happy to visit our ship, and our crew from 58 nations are also very happy to meet the Libyan people here in Benghazi on board the ship. They're coming to buy the books on board, many books, from books for small children right up to medical books, engineering books, computing books, accounting books, many, many different types.
Book topics range from science, sports, gastronomy, arts, medicine, to dictionaries and languages in both Arabic and English.
The arrival of the ship or the floating library to the city of Benghazi is, of course, a big event, bringing about great attention and a very large number of citizens. I see this from 2 sides. Of course, I attended the opening and browsed the books, of course. Most of the books were in English because it's the language of science and is universally spoken. There are also many Arabic books. I bought 3 Arabic books on the first day, including Cultural Criticism and Realistic Vision in the Story of the Palestinians, and a 3rd book related to sociology.
Volunteers from 58 different nationalities work on board the ship. Since 2009, it's been cruising to most international ports, loaded with tens of thousands of books to sell, and is classified as the largest mobile library in the world.
And finally on the program, how far can you go for love? A South African man set online users in a frenzy and has been trending on social media for literally going the extra mile to prove his love for his woman. The 57-year-old man, identified as Joseph Kagiso Ndlovu, ran a 90-kilometer ultra-marathon to propose to a woman named Prudence. Well, he was pictured holding a banner asking the woman to marry him as he approached the finish line of the Comrades Marathon on Sunday. Mr. Ndlovu said that Prudence, who was at the race to support him, said yes to his proposal, and they've been dating since the beginning of this year and plan to get married sometimes next year. We wish them all the best. And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.